Alright, in this video we're going to look at counting down in JavaScript using our while loop, and we'll also look at the stepper variable rule and how it's changed. We're going to go from high to low, and then we're also going to look at the best so far pattern as well as use random numbers. Alright, so make sure you have a project open to activity 5.4, and here's the starter code. Let's just give this a test here. And I've got E1 and that works. Alright, so while loop's counting down. So the general way to write a while loop and counting down has a number of changes from when we were counting up. So number one, this stepper variable rule, this value of our stepper variable is going to be a higher value. This condition, depending on how you write it, the inequality symbol may flip. And the third difference is that the stepper variable now, instead of going up, will now go down. Alright, so again, just to recap, when using a while loop to count down, the key differences are, number one, the stepper variable is initialized to a high value. Number two, the stepper variable will decrease instead of increasing, like the counting up pattern. And lastly, depending on how you write it, the inequality sign might flip. Alright, so again, just to recap, stepper variable steps through a predetermined sequence of values. And some questions to ask yourself are, does the statement belong inside the loop or outside of the loop? If outside of the loop, does the statement belong before the loop starts or after the loop ends? Alright, so in our first example, we'll use a while loop that counts down, and we want to print out the numbers 3, 2, 1, and 0. So let's take a look at how this works here. So I'm going to scroll down to my example 1 and right over here. And again, we want to print out the numbers from 3, 2, 1, and then 0. So we're going to start off with our variable, our stepper variable. We're going to start off with 3 this time. And then we want to create a condition that goes and prints out 0. Okay, so I'm going to say my console log x here, and then I'll say x equal to x minus 1. And let's give this a test here. And we'll say E1. And we notice it says 3, 2, 1, and 0. So if we think back about one of our common errors when dealing with loops is that we're off by 1. So we have to adjust our condition here. And so now I included 0. I said greater than or equal to 0. Now let's give this a try. And notice now it says 3, 2, 1, and then 0. So now it includes 0. All right, let's take a look at example 2. So in example 2, using a while loop that counts down, let's create 100 random numbers from 1 to 1,000 and print out the highest number. So let's take a look at the best so far pattern. So the best so far pattern keeps track of the lowest or highest values in a set of inputs. So the pattern here is number 1, initialize max or min to the first input value, and then number 2, compare subsequent values to max or min. In addition, the random number function that's built into AppLab returns a random number in the kind of range specified. So we've got random number, and then we have our minimum value, and then we have our maximum value. All right, so let's take a look at how this works here. So I'm going to scroll down to example 2 now, and let's kind of think about this. So we want 100 random numbers. So that means that we want to create a stepper variable for 100. We'll kind of count down starting from 100 this time. And we'll just kind of initialize a variable called num here outside of the loop. And now we're going to create our condition again. So we'll say while x greater than 0. And then we'll say num equal random number. And we'll say 1 to 1,000. And we want to keep track of the highest number. And so we'll call that max. Let's call that max up here. And the pattern, again, for keeping track of the best so far, in this case our max number, is we have to initialize the max min to the first value. So in this case here, our first number is going to be when x is equal to 100, because that's our starting point right here. So let's try if x equal 100. Okay, then we're going to set our max equal to num. Okay, now next part here, compare subsequent values to max. So subsequent values, so then we've got that pattern again. So now we've got if num, the num that's created randomly, is greater than max, then we're going to say again max equal to num. Okay, now the last step here, make sure you're inside of the loop. You have to say x equal to x minus 1. So this has to go, stepper variable has to go down. And then we also want to print out our max. So we'll say maximum number, and we'll say max, like that. All right, so let's give this a try here. And we'll say E2 here. So maximum number is 994. Let's just try it again a few times, because again, it's creating random numbers here. So our results will differ. So we've got 987 this time. And I'll try it again. And now we've got 992. All right, great. So let's go on to example 3 now. So using a while loop that counts down, we're going to create 100 random numbers from 1 to 500, and we want to print out the number of even numbers. All right, so if we're trying to keep track of the number of numbers, that's the accumulator pattern. So the accumulator pattern keeps a running total. So the pattern for that is, number 1, initialize the accumulator variable. When I say initialize, I mean like start off with a value. If we're trying to keep a running total, probably want to start off with counting from 0. And then number 2, we're going to accumulate. And then number 3, we're going to print. Now, the even numbers pattern, just to recall, could be something like if num modulus 2. So the modulus operator, which is the percent sign, is kind of reads like this. It's like num divided by 2, and rather than give you the answer to that, that gives you the remainder. So it's num divided by 2, any even number divided by 2, the remainder is always going to be 0. And so that's why we compare this to 0 over here. So again, just kind of think like, let's say 4 divided by 2, the remainder of that 0, so that's true, and therefore we know that that number is even. All right, so let's scroll down to our example 3 now. And again, this time around we want to create 100 random numbers again. So we'll say var x equal to 100. And we want random numbers from 1 to 500. So again, we'll just create a variable called num. And then we want to create a loop. It's going to loop 100 times. So we'll say while x greater than 0. And then we'll say num equal random number 1 to 500. And we'll use that pattern again, if num modulus 2 equals 0. We know it's even. Now, here, again, we need to keep track of how many even numbers are going by. So that means that we should probably create another variable. And intuitively, I would say that, again, always try to pick good variable names. So I'm just going to call it evens here. And I'm going to initialize that to 0 because, again, that's like our accumulator variable here that we're kind of accumulating. And so now, whenever this is true, I'm going to say evens equal evens plus 1. Okay, so this is going to increment anytime there's an even number. So let's give this a try here. I'm going to print out number of evens. I'll say plus evens like that. And so I am missing one step here, which we have to always be careful of, otherwise we'll crash our browser. We do need to decrement the stepper variable, so we've got x equal to x minus 1. All right, let's give this a try here. So we've got number of evens is 53, and again, because we're creating random numbers, this should be different every single time. So let's try it again, E3, we've got 46 this time, okay. And E3, we've got 52 this time. Again, as you notice, it is different. Oops, that's 54, yep. Keeps changing because we don't quite know what numbers are going to be produced. All right, I hope this helps, and I'll see you in the next video.